The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, a massive sphere of glass and metal that could hold representatives from over 800 species. Today, every seat was filled. Today, history would be made. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the human delegation's platform and watched the other species file into their places. She was 63 years old with gray hair, pulled back in a simple knot and deep lines around her eyes. She had served humanity in this hall for 22 years. She had made friends here. She had built alliances. She had believed in the promise of the assembly. Now she watched that promise die. The Valoran High Speaker took his place at the central podium. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and forearms that he kept folded behind his back. His species had founded the assembly 6,000 years ago. They still believed it belonged to them. We call the session to order, he said. His voice echoed through the hall. Today we vote on Resolution 7741, the Humanity Restriction Act. Elena had read the resolution many times. She knew every word. The act would limit human expansion to their current systems. It would ban humans from developing new weapons. It would place human trade ships under assembly inspection. It would require humans to share all technology with the Assembly Council. It would turn humanity into a second-class species, watched, controlled, trusted, with nothing. The Valoran High Speaker began reading the resolution aloud. Elena looked around the hall at the species who would vote on humanity's future. The Dreth, massive creatures with stone-like skin, sat in reinforced seats near the back. They had been humanity's allies once. Their ambassador had eaten dinner at Elena's home. Now he would not meet her eyes. The Selans, small and fragile, with large dark eyes, clustered together in their section. Human doctors had saved their world from a plague 3 years ago. Human volunteers still worked in their hospitals. Elena wondered if they would remember that today. The delegation sat apart from everyone else. As always, they were a warrior species, proud and quick to anger. Human peacekeepers had spent 15 years preventing them from going to war with their neighbors. The Thorax respected strength. They did not respect gratitude. The speaker recognized the Valoran delegation to present arguments in favor of the resolution. The High Speaker announced a younger Valoran stepped forward. His name was Cathil, and he had spent the last decade building support for this moment. Elena had tried to reason with him once. He had smiled politely and explained that humanity was simply too dangerous to remain free. Fellow members of the Assembly, Kethwell began, we do not propose this resolution out of hatred for humanity. We propose it out of love for peace, out of concern for stability, out of fear for our collective future. He pressed a button in Clear's throat. Images appeared in the air above the central podium. Human soldiers in combat armor, human warships firing their weapons, human cities sprawling across planets that had been empty wilderness a century ago. In 100 years since first contact, humanity has expanded faster than any species in assembly history. They have developed weapons that rival our oldest civilizations. They breed quickly. They build quickly. They learned quickly. Keith paused. And they have a history of violence that should concern us all. More images appeared. Ancient human Wars, mushroom clouds rising over cities, mass graves, burning forests. The worst moments of human history, collected and displayed for all to see. This is who humanity is, Keith said. This is what they do to each other. What will they do to us when they are strong enough? Elelina felt anger rise in her chest, but she kept her face calm. She had expected this. The Valorans had been preparing this case. For years, they had collected every dark moment from human history and ignored every bright one. The High Speaker called for opposing arguments. Elelina walked to the central podium. 800 species watched her, some with curiosity, some with fear, some with minds already made up. Thank you, High Speaker, Elena said. She kept her voice steady. I will not deny humanity's past. Yes, we have known war. Yes, we have done terrible things to each other, but that history is exactly why you should trust us. She pressed her own button. New images appeared, human soldiers helping rebuild cities after natural disasters, human doctors treating sick aliens, human engineers building bridges between communities that had been enemies for centuries. We know what war costs, Elena said. We learned it the hard way. That is why when we came to the stars, we chose a different path. In 100 years, humanity has never started a war with another species. We have ended 17. We have fed the hungry. We have healed the sick. We have stood between those who would fight and help them find peace. She looked directly at the Dref ambassador. We fought beside the Dref when the Korvax swarm threatened their worlds. We lost ships. We lost people. We did it because it was right. The Dref ambassador finally met her eyes. He looked uncomfortable. He looked away. Again, we are not asking you to ignore our past, Elena said. We are asking you to see our present, to see what we have become, to judge us by our actions, not by your fears. She returned to the human platform. She had said everything she could say. Now it was up to the assembly. The vote took 3 hours. Each species cast their decision one by one. Elelina watched the numbers change on the display board in favor of the restrictions, against the restrictions. The gap between them slowly widened. When the final vote was counted, the Humanity Restriction Act passed by a margin of 63%. The hall fell silent. Elena stood very still. She had prepared for this possibility. She had hoped it would not come, but hope was not a strategy. The High Speaker cleared his throat. The resolution is passed. Humanity has 30 standard days to accept the terms or declare their intention to withdraw from the assembly. We will now. That will not be necessary, Elena said. Every eye in the hall turned to her. She walked back to the central podium. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. Humanity accepts the decision of the assembly, she said. We will not fight it. We will not argue. You have made your choice, and we respect your right to make it. She paused. But we will not live under these restrictions. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from all assembly treaties and agreements. We will remove our people from assembly space within 1 standard year. Murmurs rippled through the hall. This was not the reaction anyone had expected. Anger, yes, threats perhaps, but calm acceptance and quiet departure. No one had prepared for this. Keith stepped forward. Ambassador Vasquez, perhaps you should take time to consider. We have considered, Elena said. For months we have watched this resolution gather support. We have seen who stood with us and who did not. We have made our Preparations, she looked around the hall one last time. We came to the stars, hoping to find friends. Many of you were. Those friends, we will remember the kindness you showed us. We will also remember today. She turned and walked back to the human delegation. Her staff was already gathering their things. They moved quietly and efficiently like people who had practiced this moment. The Dreth ambassador suddenly stood. Ambassador Vasquez, wait. Surely we can discuss. Elena paused. She looked at the Dreth with something that might have been sadness. You had years to discuss. Ambassador, you had chances to stand. With us you chose differently. We do not blame you, but we will not forget. The human delegation walked out of the hall. The doors closed behind them with a soft sound that seemed very loud in the silence. For a long moment no one spoke. Then the murmurs began. Species turned to each other, asking questions. No one could answer. What would happen? Now what would humanity do? Had they made the right choice? The Dreth ambassador sat down slowly. He thought about the old saying his grandmother used to tell him when he was young. Fear not the enemy who threatens you. Fear the one who simply leaves. For the first still hopes to get something from you. The second has decided you have nothing worth taking. He had voted for the resolution. He had believed it was the wise choice, the safe choice. Now, watching the empty platform where humanity had stood, he felt the first cold touch of doubt. The Valorans were celebrating. Kale accepted congratulations from his supporters. The High Speaker called for order and moved on to the next item of business. Everything continued as normal, but something had changed. Something important. The Assembly had voted to restrict humanity out of fear of what humans might become. Now they would learn what humanity already was, and they would learn what it meant to face the future without them. In her ship, heading back to Earth, Ambassador Vasquez sat alone in her quarters. She allowed herself 5 minutes to grieve for the future that might have been. Then she dried her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and began planning for the future that was coming. Humanity had work to do. 6 months after the vote, the galaxy began to notice the silence. It started with small things: a cargo route that no longer ran, communication relay that went offline, research station that closed its doors. One by one, piece by piece, humanity pulled itself out of the fabric of galactic civilization. On the trade world of Nexus Prime, a Valoran merchant named Shavik stood in his empty warehouse and tried to understand what had happened. 3 years ago, this building had been full of goods moving between 100 worlds. Human fighters had come and gone every day, carrying everything from medical supplies to machinery parts to exotic foods. Now the human ships were gone. The goods they carried were gone, and Shelvix was slowly going bankrupt. I do not understand, he said to his business partner, a Dree named Gorn. Other species have cargo ships. Why can we not simply replace the human roots? Gore shook his massive head. His stone-like skin made a grinding sound as he moved, because humans did not just carry cargo, they connected everything. Their roots were designed to link worlds that had no other connection. They took losses on some routes so that distant colonies could survive. That is foolish business practice, Sheik said, perhaps. But it worked. Now those colonies are dying and no one else is willing to lose money to save them. On Clear's throat, the other side of the galaxy, a similar Conversation was happening, but this one was about medicine, not cargo. The planet Calvera Prime had been fighting a plague for years. Human doctors had arrived 3 years ago with new treatments and new hope. They had worked 20-hour days. In crowded hospitals, they had trained local medical staff. They had slowly pushed the plague back until it was almost defeated. Now they were leaving. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the door of the hospital she had helped build. Her bags were packed. Her transport was waiting around her. Calvoran nurses and doctors were begging her to stay. "The plague is not gone," said Velmora, the hospital's director. Her large dark eyes were wet with tears. "If you leave now, it will come back. Thousands more will die." Sarah's heart was breaking, but she kept her voice steady. "I know, I am so sorry, but Earth has recalled all medical volunteers from assembly space. I have no choice. You could refuse. You could stay as an individual, not as a representative of humanity." Sarah had thought about that. She had thought about it every night for the past month. But she knew what her answer had to be. "If I stay, I am still human. Everything I do will reflect on my people, and right now my people need to show the galaxy that when we leave, we truly leave." She took Vila's small hands in her own. "I trained your doctors well. They know everything I know. They can finish this fight without me, but they should not have to." Vila whispered. "No, they should not." Sarah hugged the small alien carefully, mindful of fragile bones. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. Please understand that leaving you is the hardest thing I have ever done." She walked to her transport without looking back. If she looked back, she would not be able to leave. Along the Thorax border, the situation was even worse. For 15 years, human peacekeepers had maintained a fragile peace between the Empire and their neighbors, the Sentinel Collective. The two species hated each other for reasons that went back centuries. Without humans standing between them, the old hatred was already returning. Commander James Okonkwo was the last human peacekeeper to leave. He stood at the border checkpoint and watched his people board their transports across the line. The warriors were gathering. They watched the humans leave with eager eyes. Sentinel officer approached James. Her name was Crystalline, and she had worked beside him for 5 years. Her species communicated partly through light, and her body flickered with anxious patterns. "They will attack within a month," she said, "without you here. There is nothing to stop them." "I know," James said, "and you are still leaving." "I have orders, and even if I did not," he sighed, "the assembly decided they did not want humans involved in their affairs. The border is an assembly matter. We must respect that decision, even if thousands die." Even then, James looked at the gathering, the forces. "We tried to help. We tried to keep the peace. The assembly decided our help was too dangerous to accept. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps we were doing more harm than good. We will never know now." Crystalline's light patterns shifted to something that James had learned meant deep sadness. "I will miss you, Commander. I will miss all of you, and I will miss you. Stay safe, Crystalline. When the war comes, retreat if you must. Survival matters more than pride." He boarded the last transport. As it lifted off, he saw the warships moving toward the border. The war would not wait even a month. Meanwhile, in the great halls of the assembly, the Valorans celebrated their victory. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned, Keffel announced to The Council, human withdrawal is on. Schedule, within 6 months they will be completely gone from assembly space, and then what? Asked the Dreth ambassador. His name was Thrum, and he had grown more worried with each passing week. What happens when they are gone? Then we will be free of their influence, free of their danger, free to guide the galaxy, as we have always done, free to lose the services they provided. Thrum asked. I have reports from a dozen worlds about failing supply routes, abandoned medical programs, collapsing peace agreements. Humanity was more involved in galactic affairs than we realized. Key waved a dismissive hand. Temporary disruptions. Other species will step in to fill the gaps the galaxy managed without humans. For millions of years, we will manage again, but not everyone in the assembly was so confident. A Valoran intelligence officer named Zethra had been assigned to monitor human space during the withdrawal. Her job was simple: watch the humans leave and report any signs of trouble. What she found was not trouble. It was something far more concerning. She requested a private meeting with Keth. When they were alone, she displayed her findings. These are images from the solar system, she said. Human home territory. The images showed shipyards, dozens of them, hundreds of them. They floated in orbit around planets and moons throughout the system. And in those shipyards, ships were being built. Warships. Thousands of warships. This is impossible, Keith said. His voice was barely a whisper. We would have detected this level of construction. We only detect what they want us to detect. Zephyr said. Humanity has been building in secret for years, perhaps decades. Our intelligence completely missed it. Why would they build such a fleet? I do not know. But look at the numbers, Keith. Look at the ship designs. If these images are accurate, humanity has a military force that rivals the entire assembly combined. Keith stared at the images for a long time. His 4 hands were trembling. And we just told them to leave, he said. Yes, we told them to leave, and they agreed without argument, without threats, without any attempt to use this fleet to fight back. Zethra's voice was quiet but intense. Does that not concern you? If you had this kind of power and someone tried to restrict you, would you simply walk away? Perhaps they are afraid of starting a war they cannot win against. Who? If these numbers are correct, they would win easily. They could conquer the assembly in months. Zeth leaned closer. So why did they not threaten us? Why did they not fight back? Why are they simply leaving? Keith had no answer. That night he could not sleep. He kept thinking about the human ambassador's face when the vote was announced. He had expected anger. He had expected fear. He had seen neither. He had seen something that looked almost like pity. And now, lying awake in the darkness, Kethel wondered what humanity knew that the assembly did not. He wondered what was coming. He wondered if the assembly had made a terrible mistake. On Earth, Ambassador Aleli Navaskis received weekly reports from the withdrawal operation. Everything was on schedule. Supplies were being stockpiled. Citizens were returning home. The borders were being secured. And in the secret shipyards, construction continued. Alina did not know when the galaxy would need humanity again, but she knew that day would come. The assembly had rejected human friendship. Someday they would need human strength. When that day came, humanity would be ready. The only question was whether they would choose To help, Elena hoped they would. Despite everything, she still believed. In mercy, she still believed in second chances. She still believed that humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons but their willingness to help those who could not help themselves, but that choice would not be hers alone to make. It would belong to all of humanity, and humanity had just learned a hard lesson about how the galaxy treated those who offered help. 6 months done, 6 months to go. The countdown continued. Dot and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. 1 year after the vote, the last human ship crossed out of assembly space. Border stations recorded its departure with routine efficiency. A small cargo vessel, nothing special, carrying the final human citizens who had been working on distant worlds. Then the communication channels went silent. That it was not a dramatic silence. No final message, no angry words, no threats or warnings. One day, human communication relay simply stopped responding. Ships that approached human space received polite automated messages directing them to turn around. Diplomatic requests vanished into the void without reply. The galaxy had never known humanity to be quiet. For 50 years humans had been everywhere. They talked constantly. They laughed loudly. They asked questions about everything. They made friends every port and allies in every system. Human music played in cantinas across the galaxy. Human food could be found on 1,000 worlds. Human stories were told by species who had never even seen a human. Now there was nothing in the assembly hall. The empty human platform gathered dust. No one wanted to sit there. No one wanted to remove it either. It remained as a silent reminder of those who had left. Ambassador Thumb of the Dreth people found himself staring at that platform more and more often. He had voted for the restrictions. He had believed it was the right thing to do. Now 3 years later, he was no longer sure. His home world had received troubling news this morning. Dreth colony on the outer edge of their territory was failing. The supply ships that once came regularly had stopped. The colony had been part of a human trade network that connected a dozen distant worlds. Now that network was gone and no one had replaced it. We need to send our own ships. Their council, we cannot let our people starve. The route is too long, the council replied. Too expensive. The colony is not important enough to justify the cost. Humans thought it was important enough. Humans are gone. We must make our own choices. Now, TH wondered how many other colonies across the galaxy were having this same conversation. How many distant worlds were slowly dying because humans had connected them to civilization, and now that connection was severed on Kelvora Prime. The plague had returned. Dr. Velmora stood in the same hospital where she had once worked beside human doctors. The wards were full again. Staff was overwhelmed. The treatments the humans had taught them were working. But there were not enough doctors, not enough supplies, not enough of anything. We need help, she told the assembly representative who visited her world. Please contact the humans. Ask them to send their doctors back. Representative shook his head. Humanity has rejected all communication. They do not respond to messages. They do not allow ships into their space. There's nothing we can do. Then thousands will die perhaps, but that is not the assembly's responsibility. We did not create this plague. We are not obligated to cure it. Valora thought about Dr. Sarah Chan, who had worked 18 hours a day for 3 years because she believed every life mattered. She thought about the human nurses who had held dying patients' hands because no one should die alone. She thought about the human volunteers who had brought food and medicine to remote villages because someone had to. Humans had not cured the plague because they were obligated to. They had done it because they cared. The assembly did not care. The assembly had voted, and the vote said humanity was too dangerous to remain free. The dying patients on Kavora Prime were simply the cost of that decision. Along the border, the war that Commander Okonkwo had predicted was now in its 3rd year. The Thera had attacked within weeks of the human withdrawal. The Sentinel Collective had fought back. Millions had died on both sides. Entire planets had been burned to ash. The conflict showed no signs of ending. The assembly had sent peacekeepers, but they were not humans. They did not understand the history between the two species. They did not know the old grudges, the ancient insults, the wounds that went back generations. They tried to negotiate, and both sides ignored them. Crystalline, the Sentinel officer who had bid farewell to Commander Okonkwo, was now a general. She commanded the defense of her people's core worlds. Every day she watched more of her soldiers die in battles that should never have happened. She had sent 3 messages to human space in the past year. None had received a reply. She understood why the assembly had told humanity to leave. Humanity had left. Why should they care what happened now? But late at night, when the battle reports were done and the casualty lists were filed, Crystalline allowed herself to remember. She remembered Commander Okonkwo sitting down with the Sentinel leaders, patiently listening to their grievances, finding common ground. None seemed to exist. She remembered human soldiers standing in the no man's land between the two armies, refusing to move even when weapons were pointed at them. She remembered peace, and she mourned it. In the assembly intelligence headquarters, Zethra continued her surveillance of human space. What she saw confused and frightened her in equal measure. The secret fleet she had discovered was still growing. New shipyards were being built. New weapons were being developed. Humanity was preparing for something, but she could not determine what. They are not preparing to attack us, she told her superiors. If they wanted to conquer the assembly, they could have done it years ago. They have the ships, they have the weapons, but they are not moving toward our space. They are building defenses. Defense against what? Her commander asked. I do not know, but whatever it is, they expect it to be enormous. The scale of their preparations suggests they anticipate threat larger than anything we have ever faced. Perhaps they are simply paranoid. Humans are known to fear things that do not exist. Zephyr shook her head. Humans are many things, but they are not wasteful. They would not spend decades building a fleet like this without reason. They know something we do not. Her commander dismissed her concerns. Officially, the Valoran position was that humanity's withdrawal was a blessing. The dangerous species had removed itself from galactic affairs. Everything was fine, but Zethra kept watching, and she kept wondering. On the assembly border with human space, small observation station maintained its lonely vigil. The crew was minimal, just 3 officers assigned to monitor the silent frontier. Nothing ever happened. Human ships never appeared. Human signals never broadcast. The border was as dead as empty space. One night, the station's long-range sensors detected something unusual, not from human space, but from the opposite direction, from beyond the galaxy's edge. The senior officer, a young Valoran named Castle, ran the readings 3 times to make sure they were accurate. Then he sent an urgent message to headquarters. Unknown energy signatures detected in deep space bearing 347 by 29. Pattern does not match any known species. Signatures are extremely large, extremely numerous, heading toward galactic space at significant velocity. Estimated time to assembly borders 3 standard years. The message traveled through official channels. It was logged, filed, and largely ignored. Unknown energy signatures in deep space were not uncommon, probably just a natural phenomenon, nothing to worry about. But Castle was not satisfied. On his own initiative, he pointed his strongest sensors toward the source of the readings and captured detailed images. What he saw made his blood run cold. Ships, millions of ships moving in perfect formation like a swarm of insects. He had read about this in historical archives 10,000 years ago. Before his species had founded the assembly, something had swept through the galaxy. It had consumed everything in its path. Entire civilizations had vanished. Only the most advanced species had survived. The Korvax swarm, the devourers, the endless hunger. They were coming back. Castle sent his images to headquarters with a desperate warning. This time someone important saw them. The images were verified, analyzed, and confirmed. The assembly went into emergency session. By the time the full council had gathered, panic was already spreading. Species were demanding answers. How much time did they have? How large was the swarm? Could they be defeated? No one had answers. The records from 10,000 years ago were incomplete. The species who had fought the swarm before were mostly extinct. All anyone knew was that the swarm consumed everything and could not be reasoned with. We need to prepare our defenses. The Valoran High Speaker announced all number species must contribute their military forces to a unified command structure. Our combined fleet is not large enough, from replied. He had seen the numbers. Even if every species contributes everything they have, we cannot match the swarm's numbers. Silence fell over the assembly. Everyone was thinking the same thing, but no one wanted to say it. Finally, a small Kelvoran delegate spoke up. Her voice was quiet but clear. There is one species with a fleet large enough to make a difference. One species with weapons advanced enough to fight the swarm. One species who has spent the last 3 years building their military strength while we ignored them. She looked at the empty human platform. We need the humans. The assembly erupted into chaos. Some species agreed immediately. Others protested that they would not beg humanity for help. Valorans insisted they could handle the situation without outside assistance. But as the arguing continued, one question hung in the air, unspoken but impossible to ignore. Even if they asked for help, would humanity answer? Delegation ship approached the human border with all weapons powered down and all shields lowered. It was the most vulnerable a vessel could be, a deliberate sign of peaceful intentions. Inside, representatives from 12 species sat in nervous silence. Ambassador Thr. of the Dreth led the delegation. He had volunteered for this mission because he felt responsible. He had voted for the restrictions he had helped push humanity away. If anyone should humble themselves to ask for help, it should be him. Beside him sat Vila of the Kelvins, her large eyes fixed on the stars. Outside, Crystalline of the Sentinel, collective flickered with anxious light. Patterns, even a Valoran representative, was present, a young diplomat named Shannon who had argued against her government's position and been sent on this mission as punishment. The border was marked by a line of automated stations that stretched across the darkness of space. Beyond them, human territory was hidden in shadow. No lights, no signals, no signs of life. They must see us, Crystalline said. Surely they are monitoring their border. They see us from replied. The question is whether they will acknowledge us. For 2 hours, the delegation ship waited at the border. No response came. The automated stations remained silent. The darkness beyond remained empty. Then suddenly a light appeared. A single human vessel emerged from the shadows. It was small, just a patrol craft. Nothing like the massive warships Zephyr had discovered. It approached the delegation ship and stopped at a respectful distance. A communication channel opened. A human voice spoke. This is the patrol vessel Horizon 2. Unknown delegation, you are approaching human territorial space. Please state your purpose. TH moved to the communication console. His hearts were pounding, but he kept his voice steady. This is Ambassador Thrum of the Dree people, leading a delegation representing 12 member species of the Galactic Assembly. We request permission to enter human space and speak with your government on a matter of galactic urgency. There was a long pause. Then the voice returned. Please hold your position. Your request is being forwarded to the appropriate authorities. The channel went silent. The patrol vessel remained where it was, watching. Hours passed. The delegation grew more anxious with each moment. Some began to wonder if they would be turned away without ever being heard. Others feared they might be attacked. The Valoran representative, Sean, stared out the window and prayed to God she was not sure she believed in. Finally, the patrol vessel moved aside. A larger ship emerged from the darkness, an elegant diplomatic cruiser that the delegation recognized from old records. It had been the official transport of Earth's ambassadors back when humanity had ambassadors to the galaxy. The communication channel opened again. This time a different voice spoke, a voice that several members of the delegation recognized. Ambassador Thrum Velora Crystalline. It has been a long time. Elena Vasquez appeared on their screens. She looked older than they remembered. There were more lines on her face, more gray in her hair, but her eyes were the same, sharp and thoughtful and impossible to read. Ambassador Vasquez Thrum said, "We are grateful that you agreed to meet with us." "I agreed to nothing. You are at our border, and diplomatic protocol requires that I acknowledge your presence. That does not mean I will help you." The words were cold, but Thumb had expected nothing less. He pressed forward. "We come to ask for humanity's assistance in facing a threat that endangers the entire galaxy. The Korvax swarm has returned. They are approaching assembly space and will arrive within months. Our combined military forces are insufficient to stop them." Elena's expression did not change. "We are aware of the swarm. Then you know the danger If the swarm reaches the core worlds, trillions will die, entire species will be wiped out, everything the assembly has built will be destroyed. Yes, that seems likely. TH felt frustration rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. Ambassador, we are asking for your help. Humanity has ships, humanity has weapons. Together we might be able to defeat the swarm. Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost sad. 3 years ago I stood in the assembly hall and asked for your help. I asked you to see what humanity had become, to judge us by our actions, not by your fears. Do you remember what the assembly decided? Thrum remembered. He would never forget. The assembly decided that humanity was too dangerous to remain free. You voted to restrict us, to control us, to treat us like a threat that needed to be contained. Elna's voice hardened. And when we accepted your decision and peacefully withdrew, not a single species spoke in our defense, not one. We were wrong. TH said. The words came out rough, pulled from somewhere deep in his chest. We were afraid, and we let that fear guide our judgment. We made a terrible mistake. Yes, you did. And now billions will die because of that mistake. Billions who had nothing to do with the vote. Children, families, people who never heard of the restrictions or cared about politics. They do not deserve to be punished for our foolishness. Elena said nothing. She simply watched him with those unreadable eyes. Crystalline stepped forward. Ambassador Vasquez, you know me. You know Commander Okonkwo, who served beside me for years. He told me once that humanity's greatest strength was not your weapons, but your compassion, your willingness to help those who could not help themselves. James was a good man, Elena said quietly. He still is, and so are you. So is humanity. Crystalline's light patterns shifted to something pleading. I am not asking you to forget what we did. I am asking you to remember who you are, who you have always been. Vila spoke next. Her voice was small but clear. Dr. Sarah Chen saved my world. She worked until she collapsed day after day because she believed every life mattered. She cried when she had to leave us. She did not want to go. No, she told me when the plague returned, I thought we would all die. But we fought. We used everything she taught us. We are still fighting, even now. Velmora's eyes were wet with tears. Sarah did not save us because we deserved it. She saved us because she could, because helping others was who she was. Elena was silent for a long time. The delegation waited, hardly daring to breathe. Finally, the human ambassador spoke. I cannot promise anything. The decision to help or not help belongs to Earth's government, not to me, but I will take you to speak with them. I will make sure your voice is heard. She paused. Whether they listen is another matter. Thank you, Thumb said. That is all we ask. The delegation ship was escorted into human space. What they saw shocked them into silence. Ships everywhere. Thousands of ships ranged in defensive formations around stations and planets. Shipyards working at full capacity, producing new vessels at an incredible rate. Military installations bristling with weapons they had never seen before. Humanity had not been hiding in fear. During their 3 years of silence, they had been preparing for war. You knew from whispered. You knew the swarm was coming. We detected them 2 years before the vote. Elena said. We tried to warn the assembly. No one would listen to the dangerous species that needed to be restricted. The weight of that statement crushed the delegation. into silence humanity had known about. The swarm they had tried to help in. The assembly had been too busy fearing humanity to hear the warning. The delegation ship arrived at Earth. It was a beautiful world, blue and green, wrapped in white clouds. Around it orbited defensive stations, shipyards, and the largest fleet any of them had ever seen. They were taken to a great hall in the heart of a human city. It was smaller than the assembly chamber, but somehow more impressive. The walls were covered with images from human history, moments of triumph and tragedy, war and peace, all the complicated story of a complicated species. Earth's leaders were waiting for them. Presidents and prime ministers, generals, and scientists, representatives from every human nation. They listened in silence as the delegation made their case. When the delegation finished speaking, the human leaders debated among themselves. The discussions were heated. Some argued for immediate intervention. Others demanded that the assembly be left to face the consequences of its choices. The debate went on for hours. Finally, an elderly human woman stood up. She was small and frail, with white hair and weathered hands, but when she spoke, everyone listened. I was a child when we first reached the stars, she said. I remember how excited we were to meet other species, to join a galaxy full of wonders. We thought we had found a family. She looked at the delegation with eyes that had seen a century of history. Instead, we found fear, suspicion, species who looked at us and saw only a threat. We tried so hard to prove ourselves worthy. We built bridges, we healed the sick, we kept the peace, and in the end it was not enough. The old woman walked slowly toward the delegation. Despite her age, she moved with quiet dignity. 3 years ago, my great-grandson asked me why we were leaving the galaxy. He was 8 years old. He had alien friends at school. He did not understand why he would never see them again. Her voice cracked slightly. I told him that sometimes when people are afraid, they push away the ones who love them. I told him it was not his fault. I told him we would be okay. She stopped. The Korvax swarm arrived on a quiet day. There were no warnings, no dramatic announcements. One moment, the outer colony worlds were going about their normal business. Next moment, the sky was filled with death. The swarm did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They simply consumed. Their ships were organic, grown rather than built, and they numbered in the millions. They descended on worlds like locusts, stripping everything of value and leaving only barren rock behind. The first 3 systems fell within hours. The assembly fleet gathered at the predicted invasion point was caught off guard by the swarm's speed. They fought bravely, but they were overwhelmed. Ships were torn apart by swarms of smaller vessels. Stations were boarded by creatures that seemed more insect than machine. Admiral Keevil of the Valoran Navy watched his fleet crumble around him. He had commanded the largest military force in assembly history. Now he was watching it die. All ships fall back to the secondary line, he ordered. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. We cannot hold here. The retreat was chaos. Ships fled in every direction. Some toward the secondary line, others simply running for safety. The swarm pursued without mercy. For every ship that escaped, 3 were destroyed. On the bridge of his flagship, Cavil prepared to die. His ship was damaged, engines failing, weapons drained. The Swarm was closing in from all sides. Then the sensors detected something new. A massive energy surge at the edge of the system, ships dropping out of faster than light travel by the thousands. Fleet so large it almost blocked out the stars. The human fleet had arrived. All assembly forces. This is Admiral Sir Chen of the United Earth Navy. A voice announced over every communication channel. We are here to help. Please clear the following coordinates for our attack run. Sarah Chen, the doctor who had saved Kelvera Prime, she had returned to military service when the swarm was detected. Now she commanded the largest fleet in human history. Human ships moved with perfect coordination. They had been training for this fight for years. They knew the swarm's tactics, their weaknesses, their patterns. They had studied ancient records and developed new weapons, specifically designed to fight this enemy. The first wave of human ships at the swarm like a hammer, weapons fired that the assembly had never seen before. Beams of energy that tore through organic hulls like paper, missiles that tracked swarm ships and destroyed them. By the hundreds, human fighters that danced through the enemy formation with impossible grace. For the first time, the swarm faltered on the human flagship. Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold on holographic displays. Around her, thousands of officers coordinated the largest military operation in galactic history. The swarm is adapting to our weapons, her tactical officer reported. They are developing countermeasures expected. Switch to attack pattern Gamma. Launch the reserve squadrons. Admiral, we're taking casualties. The swarm numbers are overwhelming. I know. Chen's voice was calm. That is why we brought everyone. The battle lasted 9 days. 9 days of constant fighting. 9 days of ships destroyed and lives lost. 9 days of desperate struggle against an enemy that seemed endless. The human fleet took terrible losses. Ships that had taken years to build were reduced to debris in seconds. Crews that had trained together since childhood were wiped out without warning. For every swarm ship destroyed, it seemed like 2 more took its place. But humanity did not retreat. They fought with everything they had. When their weapons were drained, they rammed their ships into the enemy. When their ships were destroyed, survivors transferred to other vessels and kept fighting. When commanders fell, new leaders stepped up to take their place. And slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The assembly forces regrouped and joined the fight. Dreth warships, smaller but fierce, covered human flanks. Sentinel vessels used their unique abilities to disrupt swarm communications. Even the war with the Sentinels temporarily forgot, threw themselves at the common enemy. On the 5th day, Commander James Okonkwo led a desperate mission into the heart of the swarm formation. He had volunteered for the assignment, knowing the odds were against survival. His objective was to destroy what appeared to be a coordination node, a central point that the swarm ship seemed to follow. This is Akono to all ships, he said as his squadron approached the target. It has been an honor serving with you all. Now, let us finish this. The mission succeeded. Akono's ship was destroyed. The explosion that followed, but the coordination node went with it. Across the battlefield, swarm ships suddenly began moving erratically, their perfect coordination broken. On the 7th day, the Swarm Queen revealed itself. It was the largest vessel anyone had ever Seen a living ship the size of a small moon. It had remained hidden behind the swarm fleet, directing the battle from safety, now with its forces weakening. It emerged to fight directly. Admiral Chen made the decision immediately. All ships concentrate fire on the Queen. Everything we have, leave nothing in reserve. The combined fleet turned its attention to the massive vessel, human weapons, draft cannons, sentinel disruptors, the torpedoes, everything was focused on one target. The Queen fought back with devastating power. Ships were crushed by beams of energy. Others were swallowed by waves of smaller creatures released from the Queen's body, but the attack was relentless. Slowly, impossibly, the Queen began to weaken. Its movements became sluggish. Its counterattacks grew less effective. Great wounds opened its organic hull. On the 9th day, the Queen died. Its death scream echoed across every frequency, a sound of rage and loss that made even the bravest soldiers shudder. Without the Queen, the remaining swarm ships went mad. Some attacked each other, others simply stopped moving, drifting lifelessly through space. Within hours, the battle was over. The swarm was defeated. That, in the aftermath, the cost became clear. Humanity had lost nearly half its fleet. Thousands of ships destroyed, millions of lives lost, entire families wiped out. In the fighting, the human navy that had taken decades to build was reduced to a fraction of its former strength. The assembly had lost even more. Species that had numbered in the billions now counted their survivors in the millions. Worlds that had been thriving were now graveyards. The damage would take generations to repair, but they had survived. In the great hall of the assembly, representatives gathered for the first time since the battle. The chamber was half empty. So many species had lost their delegates in the fighting. So many seats would never be filled again. Ambassador stood at the central podium. Behind him, the empty human platform had been cleaned and prepared. We are here today to honor those who saved us, he said, to honor humanity. The doors opened. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked in. She moved slowly, leaning on a cane. The battle had aged her, but her eyes were still sharp, still thoughtful, still impossible to read. Behind her came Admiral Chen, Commander Akono's widow, Dr. Velora, Crystalline, and representatives from every species that had fought in the battle, human and alien, former enemies and old friends. They walked together into the hall. Humanity came to our aid when we did not deserve it. Thumb continued. They fought and died for species that had rejected them. They gave everything to save a galaxy that had pushed them away. He turned to Elena. On behalf of the Galactic Assembly, I offer humanity our deepest gratitude. We offer our apology for the wrongs we committed, and we offer you anything you desire. Leadership of the Assembly, control of the military, any terms you wish, name it and it is yours. Elena was quiet for a long moment. The entire hall waited. 3 years ago I told this assembly that we would remember the kindness shown to us. I also told you we would remember how we were treated. She paused. We remember everything. The hall held its breath, but memory is not the same as revenge, and kindness is not the same as weakness. Elena straightened her shoulders, setting aside her cane. Humanity does not want to rule the galaxy. We do not want to control your militaries or dictate your policies. We Want only what we wanted before. She looked around the hall at the faces. Watching her, we want a seat at the table equal to everyone else, the same seat we had before you pushed us away. Murmurs rippled through the hall, after everything humanity had done after all. The lives they had sacrificed, they were asking for nothing more than equality. We did not come back to conquer, Elena said. We came back because it was the right thing to do, because helping others is who we are. Because when we saw the galaxy in danger, we could not walk away, even though walking away would have been justified. She turned to face the human platform, still empty and waiting. We are not saints, we are not perfect, we are just people trying to do our best in a universe that is often cruel and unfair. We make mistakes, we get angry, we hold grudges longer than we should. She walked to the platform and placed her hand on it. But we also forgive, we give second chances, we believe that people can change, that enemies can become friends, that the future does not have to repeat the past. Elena climbed onto the platform and stood where human ambassadors had stood for 50 years. So here is what humanity wants. We want to try again. We want to rebuild what was broken. We want to prove that friendship is stronger than fear. That Cooper